Okay, welcome everyone. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to have the great Rabbi Leff join us for Yom Haatzmaut, for Israel Independence Day. As has always been our practice, we express our joy on Yom Haatzmaut with some song. We had Hallel this morning, and with some learning, which is the reason for this lecture and shir. And Rabbi Leff, I'll read the short bio, but then give some personal reflections as well. Rabbi Leff is known across the Jewish world as an inspirational Rav, author, teacher, and speaker. He was born in the Bronx and received smicha from the Telz Rabbinical College, taught widely in Ohio before becoming the rabbi of Young Israel of Greater Miami. In 1983, he and his family made Aliyah, and he became the Rav of Moshav Matisyahu and Rosh Yeshiva and Rosh Kollel of Yeshiva Gedola, Matisyahu and Kollel Matisyahu. Moshav Matisyahu, everyone should research it. It's an amazing community in Israel. It was started by American Jews, as I understand, with a Zionist passion and dream to create a unique community within the state of Israel. Rabbi Leff was the rabbi for my in-laws family and had great connections to my wife's family, the Hochner family in South Florida. And throughout my youth group experience, Rabbi Leff was also well known in NCSY and in many other circles and avenues. It's great to hear directly from the Holy Land, and we look forward to Rabbi Leff's remarks. Without any further ado, Rabbi Zev Leff, welcome to Virginia.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you all, and again, I hope someday to see you much closer, not through a screen. After an introduction like that, I'm a little intimidated to speak, but I'll tell you the truth. I do deserve the praise of being a great rabbi. I'll tell you why, even though that sounds a little haughty. The Mediterranean Sea is called the Yam HaGadol, the Great Sea. Now, compared to the Atlantic and the Pacific, the Mediterranean is a drop of water in a bucket. So why is it called the Great Sea? So the rabbis tell us because a portion of it washes up on the shore of Eretz Yisrael, and that makes it great. I also washed up on the shores of Eretz Yisrael about 38 years ago, so I guess that makes me great too. So I will accept the introduction in that vein. In any case, I want to speak to you a little bit about what the spiritual benefits of Eretz Yisrael are. I want to start with the following question. We know that Avraham Avinu, our patriarch Abraham, was tested with 10 tests. One of those tests was a test of Lech Lecha, that he should leave his family and familiar surroundings and go to Eretz Yisrael. That was a test. Question is, why was it a test? Since God told him, when he told him to make this move, Lech Lecha, Rashi says, means go for your good and your benefit. L'tovascha u'lehanoscha. Let me explain what that means. There are many things in this world that are good for you, but they're not pleasurable. I knew when my mother, Aleh Shalom, would say, eat your vegetables, they're good for you, they couldn't taste so good. And there are a lot of things in this world that are pleasurable, and they're not good for you. Eretz Yisrael, God promised Avraham Avinu that if he made this move, it would be good and pleasurable. So where's the test? If God would tell me to go to Timbuktu, and he promised me it'd be good and pleasurable, why wouldn't I want to go? So where's this test of Avraham Avinu if God guaranteed that it would be good and pleasurable for him? In order to answer this, I want to ask another question. Before we entered the land of Israel, God told Moshe Rabbeinu to tell us the following. You're familiar with the land of Egypt, he said, and you know over there you always had a readily available water supply for drinking water, for irrigation, because you had the Nile. And the Nile overflowed by cycle, and you always had a plentiful supply of water. But the land I'm bringing you to, Eretz Yisrael, Loka Eretz Mitzrayim, here, it's not like the land of Egypt. Limtara Shamayim Tishtemayim. There is no readily available water supply in Eretz Yisrael. If it rains, you have water. If it doesn't rain, you don't have water. Now, I don't know, it doesn't sound like God's a great salesman. If I would hear that, I'd take a U-turn and go back to Egypt. What's God trying to do? What is he telling us? That the land of Israel is not like the land of Egypt and playing down the importance of the land of Israel. The same question we can ask in the following. The original snake was cursed with a few different curses, lost its legs, and so on. One of the curses was, V'ofar tochal kol yemei chayecha. You will eat dust your entire life. Now, everyone knows that snakes don't eat dust. It's not nutritious. So what does it mean? You'll eat dust. So the rabbis say two different explanations. One is that whatever the snake eats tastes like dust. It has no taste buds. That I understand is a curse. To eat and not to be able to taste anything, everything tastes like dust, to curse. The second explanation, though, is very difficult to understand. The second explanation is that wherever the snake will be, its food supply will be available to it like the dust of the earth. Wherever you go, there's dust. Wherever the snake goes, he has readily available food supply. Now, that doesn't sound to me like a curse. I wouldn't mind a curse like that. Wherever you are, your refrigerator will fill up, and you will have no problem ever of having food. Why is that a curse? Just the opposite. The Jewish people in the desert had a blessing. Every day, they had one day's food supply of the man. And if they tried to save it for the next day, it rotted. Every morning, they woke up with the cupboards bare and had to be given a one-day food supply. And that's considered a blessing. Doesn't make any sense. And it didn't make any sense to me until the following occurrence happened. I used to be a rabbi in Miami, as was mentioned, and one of my congregants was a teacher in the local secular public high school, and she taught Hebrew. In those days, Hebrew was an accepted second language in the public school system. Today, the accepted second language in Miami is English. But in any case, in those days, Hebrew was an accepted second language. And she had a lot of Jewish students, obviously, in her class. And one day she called me and she said, Rabbi, I have a 17-year-old student in my Hebrew class, and he has tried to commit suicide twice unsuccessfully. And we're all afraid that he's going to try again and be successful. And no one has been able to get to him in order to dissuade him from trying again. So maybe I can bring him to you, and maybe you'll try to convince this young man not to try to commit suicide. So I said, sure, bring him in. She brought me this young 17-year-old. I never saw in my life a more despondent, depressed, sad-looking person. And I said to him, in your short 17 years of life, what could be so terrible that you want to take your own life? He said, Rabbi, I'll tell you. He said, I grew up only with my father. My mother abandoned me when I was an infant. I don't even know who she is. All I have in this world is my father. My father is a very wealthy man, and we live together. One day, a few weeks ago, my father called me in, and he told me that he has met a woman that he wants to marry, and she made a condition that I would not be in the picture if she is going to marry him. So he took a set of keys out of his right-hand pocket, and he said, these are keys to a very plush condominium in a yuppie section of Miami, fully furnished. I paid for it. It's yours. Enjoy it. Out of his left-hand pocket, he pulled another set of keys. He said, these are keys to a very expensive sports car, fully paid for. You need transportation, enjoy it. And then out of his wallet, he pulled a credit card on his name. And he said, if you need food, clothing, entertainment, within reason, put it on the credit card and I'll pay the bill. Just one thing. It's been nice knowing you. Have a nice life. Don't call me. Don't come to visit me. And that's it. He shook my hand and closed the door behind me. Now, I was very young at the time. And I thought to myself, if I was 17 years old and I had my own apartment and my own sports car and unlimited credit, I do not think I'd be suicidal. I think that I would be pretty happy. So my first reaction was to say to this young man, I didn't say it to him, but to think to say it to him, you know, everybody in this world has their package of tsaros, of problems. You have yours, I have mine. Let's switch. You give me your problems, your apartment, your car, and your credit card. I'll give you my problems. Then I realized that every time that young man occupied that apartment or drove that car or used that credit card, it reminded him that no one loved him and that he was totally rejected by everyone in this world. And that's a curse. And that was the curse of the snake. Just to allay your curiosity so you don't think about this for the rest of the time and don't listen to what I'm saying, you want to know what happened to that young man. So after he left my office, I made an investigation and I found out that he was adopted and he was not really Jewish. He was adopted from a Catholic family. So I called the Catholic services in Miami and I told them the story. And I said, you have a responsibility to find this young man a foster home. And they did. And before I left Miami, about 2 years later, I checked up on him. And I found that he was very happy with his foster parents, felt loved and accepted. And he still had his apartment and his sports car and his credit card. So he had the best of both of these worlds. And he was set for life. In any case, that is the curse of the snake. God said there have to be snakes in this world, but I don't want to have anything to do with you. So I'm providing your food supply till the end of time. You have plenty of food, but you have no relationship with me. That's a curse. The Jewish people only had 1 day's food supply, but every morning they woke up and they knew they had a Father in heaven who cared for them, who provided them with their sustenance daily. They didn't have a lot of food, but they had a very loving and caring relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The same thing with Eretz Yisrael. Egypt, God said, look, Egypt has to have water. I'm going to put them on a Shabbos clock called the Nile. I don't want to have anything to do with them directly. Let them have their water and have it indirectly, right, through nature. But the Jewish people, one of the keys that God reserves for himself is the key to rain. Rain comes directly from God. And the Rabbi said, you may not have as much water in Eretz Yisrael, but if you have it, it's going to be coming directly from me because I'm your Father in heaven who cares for you. And that's a blessing. Comes out that a person really needs the right lenses to know what is a blessing and what's a curse. Depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for a lot of food and a lot of water, then the snake got a blessing and the Jewish people got a curse. If you're looking for a relationship with God, then the Jewish people got a blessing and the snake got a curse. So the test of Avram Avinu was, is he going to be able to align his values and standards in such a way that he'll appreciate that what Eretz Yisrael has to offer is for his good and his pleasure, that he'll see what really is good and pleasurable in this world and understand what is a blessing and what's a curse. They say that Rabbi Menachem Mendel Vitebsk came to Israel in the 1800s. And after he was here for 40 days, he made a gala banquet for his students. And they asked him, what's the occasion? What are we celebrating? He said, I'll tell you. Before I set sail to Eretz Yisrael from Europe, I went to visit a Kabbalist. And he told me that when I get to the land of Israel, I'll see that every rock in Israel is a diamond. I got off the boat. I saw plenty of rocks. I didn't see one diamond. I fasted for the last 40 days in the daytime and only ate at night. And today I opened the shutters and I saw that every rock in Israel is a diamond. You need the right eyes. You need the right perspective to appreciate what Eretz Yisrael can give you, what's really a curse and what's really a blessing. And the truth is that the land of Israel itself, its very environment, its air, its nature, helps a person have the right perspective on life. Let me explain to you that with the following question. The Medrash says that before Avraham Avinu was commanded to come to Eretz Yisrael 5 years earlier, he took a world trip, a pilot trip. He came to Aram Naharayim, which was outside of Eretz Yisrael, and he saw a bunch of idol worshippers planting and plowing and harvesting, a bunch of idol worshippers, He saw them partying, eating and drinking and partying. And he said, God, this is not the place I would want to settle. I have to raise my children. And he came to the land of Israel and he saw a bunch of idol worshippers planting and plowing and harvesting. And he said, God, this is the place. Now, on the surface, very difficult to understand what impressed Avraham Avinu about Eretz Yisrael rather than outside of Eretz Yisrael. I mean, what difference did it make if the idol worshippers were planting, plowing, and harvesting, or eating, drinking, and partying? They all were idol worshippers. Well, the answer, I think, is the following. There are two Mishnayos in Pirkei Avos. During the summer now, we are learning every Shabbos another chapter of Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers. And in there is the following Mishnah. The Mishnah says, on the one hand, Yofa sha'achas shel koras ruach ba'olam haba mikol chayei olam hazeh. 1 second of peripheral pleasure in the world to come is greater than all the pleasure of this world. Let's first analyze what that means. What is peripheral pleasure? So they give an example. Imagine if there's a banquet being prepared and you're not invited, and you can't even get into the banquet hall to see the food, let alone eat it. The most you can do is pass by the outside of the banquet hall and get a whiff of the aroma of the food that's cooking. That's called peripheral pleasure. You don't see the food, you don't eat the food, you just get a whiff of the aroma. 1 second of that kind of pleasure in the world to come is greater than all the pleasure of this world. What does that mean? Take all the pleasure anyone ever had, from Adam and Eve and on, put it all together, and it's nothing compared to 1 second of peripheral pleasure in the world to come. That makes this world pretty much not important at all. And the next world is what's important. And yet there's another Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says just the opposite. Yofa sha'achas shel tshuvo ma'asim tovim ba'olam hazeh mikol chayei olam haba. 1 second of repentance and good deeds in this world is greater than the whole next world. So these two Mishnayos seem to be contradictory. So if we were academians, scholars, we probably would say that there are two schools amongst the rabbis. There was the otherworldly school, the ones that preferred the world to come, and there was this worldly school, the ones who preferred this world. There's only one problem. The same rabbi said both of these Mishnayos, and he wasn't schizophrenic and didn't argue with himself. So there must be some explanation as to when this world is better than the next world and when the next world is better than this world. And it really depends on your outlook on what this world is all about. And there are basically two outlooks to look at what this world is all about. There's a secular view of this world, and that, I think, is brought out by a sentence that I saw printed on a T-shirt that they were selling in New York many, many years ago, and it was selling like hotcakes. The sentence said the following: the one who has the most toys when he dies wins. What does that mean? Toys are things that give you pleasure, objects, experiences. When you're little, the toys are little. When you get bigger, the toys get bigger. And that's the purpose of life. You're born, you die. In between those 2 points, amass toys, have pleasure. And the one who has the most toys, the most pleasure in this world wins, has a successful life. I was looking for an asterisk with a footnote. What exactly you win at that moment, since you're no longer here. And then I heard about a woman from Los Angeles who, before she died, put in her will that she wants to be buried in her Rolls Royce, not in a coffin. And her heirs contested it because they wanted that Rolls Royce. They didn't care if she was in the ground, but not the Rolls Royce. And she won, and she got to be buried in her Rolls Royce. So she had the biggest toy, and she was able to be buried in it. I don't know what that did for her. I'm sure her gas mileage at that time was great because she wasn't going anywhere. But in any case, she had the biggest toy, and she got to be buried in it. She won. She had a successful life. If that is your philosophy of life, which is not it's not the Torah's philosophy of life, which we'll see in a second, but if that is your philosophy of life, life in this world is very, very depressing. And it can be represented in the following way. Imagine a man standing outside the delivery room, waiting for news of his wife's impending birth. And the doctor comes out and says, I have bittersweet news for you. Your wife just gave birth to a baby, but the baby was born with a disease from which it is surely going to die, a fatal disease. The man says to the doctor, doctor, give me hope. There's a cure. No, there's no cure. You're looking for a cure. No, we gave up long ago. Someone survived this terrible disease miraculously without a cure. Never. Not in the annals of science and medicine. The man says to the doctor, I never heard of such a terrible disease. What's the name of this terrible disease that my child was born with, which you tell me he's for sure going to die from? The doctor says, you see, when your child was born, he contracted the disease called life. Some people have survived 80 years, 90 years, 120. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we know one thing for sure. Whoever is born with the disease called life eventually succumbs to it. Imagine if we'd know how long we're going to live. We're all going to live 120 happy, healthy years. Imagine how many seconds there are. Calculate how many seconds there are in 120 years. Very simple. Take 120, multiply it by 365. That's how many days in 120 years. Multiply that by 24. That's how many hours. Multiply that by 60. That's how many minutes. And multiply that by 60. That's how many seconds. Big number. Put that on a digital display. Put it up in the delivery room. And the moment you're born, press the button, and the numbers start to go backwards towards zero. So life in this world is basically a long death. It's a disease that eventually you succumb to. But that's not the Torah's view of life. According to the Torah, life doesn't start when you're born, and it doesn't end when you leave this world. It's only a very small portion of our existence. We were all created as souls when the world was created, and we existed as souls in a spiritual world until our soul came into this world and occupied a body. And eventually our souls will go back to that spiritual world, and we will enjoy an eternal world to come. Why do we come into this world? If we started out in that spiritual world and we're going to end up there, why didn't God just leave us there? Because God wanted us to earn and create our eternal spiritual pleasure. Because what you get unearned is not appreciated as much as something that you earn, that you create. So the Rabbi Shalom put us into this world to earn and create our world to come. We don't just earn it. We create it. Everything we do in this world, we can do in a way that's more godlike, and then our souls become more like God, and we have a closer relationship to him after 120 years. Or we can do things that make us less like God, less godlike, and we have less of a relationship. We create that relationship, and we can create it every second, anything we're doing, anything. It's not just fulfilling Torah or mitzvahs. It's anything. How a person has recreation, how he has entertainment, how he involves himself with eating, drinking, sleeping, everything. His social life, his economic life can be done in a way that is godlike or a way that is not godlike. And the more he makes his life a godlike life, that doesn't mean sitting in a corner and saying Tehillim and reciting Psalms. It means living a full life in this world, which you can enjoy. But the goal is not the pleasure in this world. That's only a means to reach an end. And the end result is creating a soul that has that close relationship to God. And if that's the way that you live, opposed to the first way, every second of life in this world is important. As opposed to the first philosophy, no second in this life is important. Because if the whole purpose of life is pleasure, how much pleasure can you have in 1 second? Not too much, not at all. You need a lot of seconds. So in order to really have pleasure in this world, if that's the goal, you need a lot of seconds. You need quantity of time, but you also need quality. If God forbid you're in a coma in the hospital, even if you're 18, 19 years old and have 100 years ahead of you, but your quality of life is almost nil. So how much pleasure can you have in a coma in the hospital? So you need a combination of quality and quantity of life, and then maybe life is important, because then you can have pleasure. But from a Torah standpoint, if you have 1 second left, you're 119 and a half, and you're in a coma in the hospital. You have no quantity of life and you have no quality. You still can create the world to come. How so? Even if you're in a coma, you can be thinking. And if your brain isn't functioning, but maybe your soul is functioning, and you can think. So what can you think about? You can think about mitzvahs of believing in God, fearing God, loving God, and you get rewarded for that. And your soul becomes more godlike. You can be contemplating helping people or whatever, even if you can't do it. We know that you get rewarded if you want to do something good, and you're prevented from circumstances beyond your control. So you pretty much can do anything. And you can create eternity in 1 second. That's why the Talmud tells us of a story. There was a habitual sinner. When in the midst of a sin, something happened and he repented in an intense way. And it was so intense that he died. And a holy, heavenly voice resounded that he is fortunate that he entered the world to come. And Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi cried when he heard that. And he said, you see, a person can acquire his world to come in 1 second. The Telzer Rosh Hashiva asks, why was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi crying? He should have been ecstatic. You can get your world to come in a second. He said he was crying because he realized you could do that every second. Every second you can create eternity, more and more eternity. There's no limit. In mathematics, there is an infinite amount of whole numbers, and there's an infinite amount of fractions between each whole number. So there's an infinite amount of infinities. In the world to come, there is an infinite amount of eternities. And every second you can create more and more. That is the difference between the philosophy of put in effort now for the future or the philosophy of immediate gratification. The Meiri, one of the commentaries of the Talmud, says that this philosophy of the Torah, of the world to come being the result of planting the seeds in this world, that tells us that the world to come is not another world. It's the fruit of this world. And that explains these two Mishnayos. If you look at this world as a place where pleasure is the goal, then the pleasure of this world is nothing compared to one peripheral second of pleasure in the next world. But if you look at this world as a place where you create eternity, then this world is even better than the next world. Because in the next world, you're stuck with what you got and what you created and what you planted in this world. And in this world, you can create more and more every second. So the Meiri says that this philosophy of putting in effort in this world for the sake of creating eternal pleasure is called the philosophy of fruit. Just like fruit, you plant the seeds and the result is not immediate. It's not immediate gratification. It's something that you prepare with effort now for the future. That's called the philosophy of fruit, because the world to come is like the fruit of this world. And that's what Avraham Avinu saw. He saw that the land of Israel, the environment there is conducive to that fruit philosophy. Even the idol worshipers were concerned about putting in effort now, planting, plowing, harvesting for a future benefit. So they saw it as the future benefit of the fruit that they're putting the effort into. But my children will take that environmental influence and use it to put in effort in this world for the sake of the next world. And that's the environment here. And he saw the environment in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, is the opposite. Eat, drink, and be merry. He saw that the people outside of Eretz Yisrael, the idol worshippers, were influenced by the environment there to make pleasure the goal of this world. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Now, it does not mean that you can't live a beautiful Torah life outside of Eretz Yisrael. I see that you have a very, very fine Rav and a very fine congregation, and you are living a very fine Torah life. But it's a struggle because you have to fight against the environment. The environmental influence in Virginia is eat, drink, and be merry. You people are very strong, and you fight against that environment, and you live a Torah life. Very nice. But to do it, you have to fight against the environment. And that does not mean that in Eretz Yisrael you can't live a totally anti-Torah life. Unfortunately, there are people here that do that. But here you have to fight the environment to live a non-Torah life. Here, the Torah life is what the environment influences. And there, the non-Torah life is what the environment influences. I once saw this very clearly. We have in Israel, we used to have years ago, today it's changed a little bit, something called Shavua HaSefer, Book Week, where all the publishers of books and Sfarim bring their latest publications and the ones they can't get rid of to a central place in every city once a year for a week, and they make it a night out for the family. They had rides for the children and cotton candy, and the people, they bring their books and put them out on tables, and the adults peruse the books and get very, very fine sale prices on these books and see what the new books that have been put out are. And the children have a night out. And one year, I took my family to Gan HaPa'amon, Liberty Park in Yerushalayim, where they had this book fair, Book Week. And we had a nice time, nice family night out, and came home. And that night I had a flight to America at 1 a.m. So I boarded the plane. 11 hours later, I was at JFK, and I get off the plane, and the person who met me said that he has tickets to something that's going on in Javits Convention Center that day, and he has an extra ticket. Would I like to join him? I said, tell me what exactly is going on in Javits Convention Center that you think I would be interested in. He said, we're having what's called a kosher food fest. What is that? all the producers of kosher food bring their latest products, put them out on tables, and everybody walks around and tastes the food and gets to see what the coming year's kosher market's going to look like. I said, I have nothing against food, especially kosher food. But, I just came from Israel a few hours ago, and we were walking around tables looking at books. Now you want me to walk around table and look at food. There's got to be a difference between the focus in Israel and the focus here in New York, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with kosher food. It's fine. But it depends what your focus in life is. Are you walking around tables looking at food? Or are you walking around tables looking at books and looking at Sfarim? So Eretz Yisrael is conducive to that fruit philosophy, whereas outside of Eretz Yisrael is conducive to the opposite philosophy. And that's why the Torah said when you come to Israel, the first thing you should do is plant fruit trees. Because God said, when I created the world, that's what I did. I planted fruit trees. I planted the Garden of Eden. I planted fruit trees. So you do the same. Now, I understand we're supposed to emulate God in how we conduct ourselves. He's merciful. You should be merciful. But he plants trees and you should plant trees. God also makes it rain. Should we walk around with a watering can and spritz water because we want to be like God? What does that mean? God plants trees and we should. But that's what it means. God said the whole purpose of this world is to plant trees and reap the fruit in the world to come. Make your life significant. Put in the effort here. Make yourself a more godlike person so you'll have eternal pleasure. So you plant trees in Eretz Yisrael because that's what the land of Israel is conducive to. It's conducive to living a life where you'll put in effort for the future. And the truth is, those people who came to build the state of Israel in the early 1900s, many of them were not religious people. Some of them were even anti-religious. But they didn't come to enjoy themselves. They came to clear the swamps, to build a country for the future. The atmosphere here was conducive to that. Put in effort now for future generations. You may not have the pleasure of this world. You're going to be clearing swamps and building and clearing land and creating a state. But they were able to put in that effort. The environment itself influenced them to be able to put in effort then for a future benefit, for future generations or whatever. That's what the land of Israel has to offer. Why am I telling this to people in Virginia? They're not here. Make you feel bad. They're not here. Let me tell you something. Avraham Avinu, so he had a mitzvah to go and settle in Eretz Yisrael. But the rabbis tell us that 5 years before that mitzvah took place, Avraham Avinu already was in Eretz Yisrael on his own. Like I told you, he took a pilot trip. He took a world tour. And he ended up in Eretz Yisrael 5 years earlier. God sent him back to Aram Naraim, to Haran, to Chutz La'aretz. And 5 years later, he commanded him to come back to Eretz Yisrael. So the Shalom HaKadosh asked the following question. He says, if God knew that 5 years later he's going to command Avram to come to Eretz Yisrael, why did he send him back? Why didn't he let him stay already? Why did he send him back and then have to command him to come back? Says the Shalom HaKadosh the following. He said, because God knew that there would be times in Jewish history where Jews would not be able to be in Eretz Yisrael. They'd have to be in Virginia, and they'd have to be in the Soviet Russia, or they'd have to be in a million different lands all over the world. And they wouldn't be able to come to Eretz Yisrael. Whatever Avraham Avinu did created a reservoir of strength for all future generations. And therefore the Rabban Shalom said, I want there to be a reservoir of ga'aguim, of tremendous longing for Eretz Yisrael. You can imagine. Avraham Avinu was in Eretz Yisrael, realized how beautiful it was. And then he was forced to go back. So for 5 years, he longed to go back to Eretz Yisrael. He had ga'aguim. He had tremendous, tremendous feelings of longing for Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom said, I want in those 5 years for Avram Avinu to create a reservoir of power of longing for Eretz Yisrael, that any Jew who can't be there physically, but at least should long to be there, feel they're missing something. Now, what's the purpose of this longing? Is it just to feel frustrated that you have to be where you are and you can't be in Eretz Yisrael? Obviously, that's not the purpose. The purpose is a different purpose. The rabbis tell us that for people who can't physically be in Eretz Yisrael, they have a surrogate Eretz Yisrael. It's called your shul. It's called a yeshiva, a beis medrash. Bate knesios, bate midrashos of Chutz La'aretz have a law of Eretz Yisrael. They are surrogate Eretz Yisrael. They become branches of Eretz Yisrael. And your shul in Virginia is a connection to Eretz Yisrael. What does that mean? That means that if you long to be in Eretz Yisrael, and you long to be in that environment, which everything you do in Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to shekel Eretz Yisrael. So people think that means planting, plowing, right, fulfilling the agriculture in Eretz Yisrael. And here, even the fruit is it has mitzvahs to it. In Virginia, right, you have to go to the supermarket and look for an OU or look for an OK or a Chaf K to make sure the food is kosher. But if you go to the vegetable fruit stand, you don't have to worry. Fruits, vegetables, just buy them. They're all okay. But here in Eretz Yisrael, you have to look for a hechsher for fruits and vegetables too, because there's a host of mitzvahs that have to do with fruits and vegetables, trumas and maasros or whatever. Rabbi Cook from Rehovot once told me the following story. His yeshiva was making a parlor meeting in New York to raise funds for his yeshiva in Rehovot. And they had it by someone whose standard of kashrus was not up to par. But he was a wealthy man and he wanted to help the yeshiva. So they said, don't serve anything but fruit. And that way we don't have to worry about the kashrus. So the man, Rabbi Cook, was sitting there, and the host brought over a bowl of fruit, and Rabbi Cook took an apple from the bowl. While he's holding the apple in his hand, he starts to think to himself, what did I do? How do I know they took trumas and maasros from this apple? How do I know it's not orla? Right? All these kinds of prohibitions that could possibly affect an apple in Eretz Yisrael. If I eat it, I may have trouble with God. If I don't eat it, I may have trouble with the host. What am I supposed to do? And this was going through his mind. And then he remembered he's in New York. And the apples don't have any mitzvahs of trumas and maasros, just an apple. Make a bracha and eat it. He said he realized then that even the apples in Eretz Yisrael wear yarmulkes, not only the people. Eretz Yisrael, everything you do, the Chassam Sofer says, anything that attaches the people to the land and makes us able to settle in the land better. You could be a shoemaker in Eretz Yisrael, a psychologist, a doctor, a lawyer. But if it helps to create a functioning society in Israel, it's a mitzvah. So everything becomes a mitzvah. So if you have that feeling, so then you can live in Chutz La'aretz and have your beautiful kehillah as you have with your fine robe. And you can live a life that mimics what Eretz Yisrael is all about. So your shul, your kehillah, your congregation, your community is an extension of Eretz Yisrael. And if you long to be in Eretz Yisrael and to be able to benefit from the environment of Eretz Yisrael and the land that's holy itself, and you have that tremendous longing, then where you are, even though physically you're in Virginia, but your mindset is Eretz Yisrael. It's like you're living in the land of Israel until it's possible for you to come here physically. But even more than that, it's not just your kehila, your congregation, your community. It's even more than that. There's a medrash that says the following: "Lemishbechosehem yatzu min hateva." When they left Noah's Ark, they left by family. Mikan, says the medrash, from here we can derive that when you leave the shul, you should leave by family. We don't daven by family. The men and women are separate in shul. But when you leave the shul, you should leave family by family. What's the connection? The word teva means a boat. Noah's Ark is a teva, tevas Noach. But the word teva in the Mishnah means the ark where you keep the Sefer Torah. And in English, that connection is very clear. Noah's Ark and the Holy Ark. So when you leave the ark, you should leave by family. Just like when they left the ark, they left by family. When you leave the ark, meaning the shul, you should leave by family. What's the deeper meaning of it? We live in a world where we are surrounded by flood waters that threaten to drown us. A lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of corruption, and things that are the opposite of Torah values. And we're threatened to be drowned by these threatening waters. So how do you protect yourself from it? So you can't isolate yourself from it. It's everywhere. You can insulate yourself. And those are the arcs that a person can become part of that will insulate him from the threatening flood waters that would threaten to drown us in all of the negative ways that this world has to offer. And what are those arcs? Shuls, yeshivas, communities. That's the ark. But you can't stay in a shul your whole life. I know it's beginning to feel like that now. But in any case, you can't stay in a shul your whole life. You can't stay in a yeshiva your whole life. How are you able to leave that mothership and still be protected? That's what the Medrash says. If you create within your family the same standards and the same values that your shul represents, that your community represents, then your home and your family become a lifeboat. That's an extension of the mothership. And if the mothership is an extension of Israel, of Eretz Yisrael, because it has the same ideas and the same environment of what Eretz Yisrael is all about, then your home becomes also an extension of Eretz Yisrael, an extension of your community, of your shul, of your yeshiva, and so on. So the mishbechosehem yatzu min hateva. You can leave the teva if you create that your family is a lifeboat, an extension of the mothership that is your community, and the real mothership is Eretz Yisrael. So you are all honorary members of Eretz Yisrael. And when Mashiach will come, or perhaps even before that, for many of you, so we have plenty of empty land around us that you can relocate your beautiful shul from Virginia in Eretz Yisrael, and all of you will be able to be here, and we'll all be able to celebrate not just Yom Haatzmaut, but celebrate the coming of Mashiach b'mheira v'yameinu.
Amen. Rabbi Leff, I'd like to ask two questions, if I can, before you depart from us. It's so great for us to be able to connect from a distance using this technology, connecting with you from so many thousands of miles away. You shared a message with us of understanding what Zionism really means, about building for the future, and a message of understanding how we are all a part of this Zionist dream that we reference in Psalms and Hayinu Kichomim. I was wondering if you could share with us personally what it was like to build a community from scratch as an American with Americans in Israel? That's question number one. And question number two, if you could leave us with what Israel Independence Day means to you. What's the message you'd like to share, firstly, with your audience and your students?
Okay. First of all, what did it feel like to come to Eretz Yisrael and to build a community? It was, I came here when I was about 35, 36 years old. And it was a new world because, like we said, a lot of the things that don't even apply in Chutz La'aretz apply here. And there were new questions that came right before a Shemitah year. Next year is Shemitah. Here is a different world. You have no idea what that's like, where there's laws that you've never heard of, and I didn't hear of. And we had 11 families here building a community. And it was a Moshav Shitufi, where everyone worked on the Moshav, and everybody worked and lived 24 hours a day together. And you can imagine what kind of social climate that created. And in any case, but it was exhilarating. We felt that we were building the future here. And eventually we were a little enclave surrounded by Arab villages and one or two other yishuvim in the area. Now we're surrounded by thousands and thousands of religious Jews that live in Kiryat Sefer and Hashmonayim, to our right and to our left. And the area here has been built up. It's now one of the central areas. The city of Modi'in is right next to us. So we see that our efforts have been blessed, and we see how putting in effort, the Ribono Shel Olam helps us and builds up Eretz Yisrael in a miraculous way. As you said, Haninu Kecholmi. And therefore, on Yom Haatzmaut, whatever you hold, religiously, say Hallel, don't say Hallel, whatever, that's to a certain degree irrelevant. But everyone in this world has to have a tremendous amount of Hakaras Hatov, of gratitude to God and to those people who put their lives on the line, and some people who sacrificed their lives to make this miracle happen. And I surely would not be living in Israel if it was under Jordanian rule. I'm only here because there's a state of Israel. And I have a tremendous amount of gratitude to those soldiers who laid down their lives in order to see to it that this country can continue to exist and to protect the people here. People who have built this country, we owe them a debt of gratitude to. So that's how a person should feel on Yom Haatzmaut and Yom HaZikaron. You have tremendous gratitude to the people who made this miracle possible. God creates miracles, but he does it through human beings. And you have to have gratitude to the people that he chose to be his representatives to make this miracle happen. So a person on Yom Haatzmaut has to feel tremendous gratitude to the Ribono Shel Olam. We are able to have something that generations, 2,000 years of Jewish history didn't have. They had tremendous desire to be in Eretz Yisrael, daven for it 3 times a day, but physically they couldn't be here. And we have the option to get on a plane and come here and settle here. We have to have a tremendous amount of gratitude. Not everybody has that opportunity at this moment. There are many, many legitimate reasons why a person would not be able to come and move to Eretz Yisrael right at the present time. But the potential is there, and for that you have to have gratitude. That's the main lesson, the main message of Yom Haatzmaut, and surely Yom HaZikaron, gratitude. For that is the foundation of Judaism, gratitude. Gratitude to God and gratitude to those people who enable us to be able to benefit from the miracles that the Ribono Shel Olam did.
Oh, thank you very much. I know that we're in the Asher family, we are grateful for Israel Independence Day because the creation of the state of Israel allowed my wife to study there and myself to study there. And you are highly regarded as one of my wife's favorite teachers in seminary in Israel. And I look at you professionally, thinking to myself, you went with 11 families, 10 American families, and built a city in Israel from nothing. It's just an incredible, inspirational story. I want to thank you for all of your service to the Jewish people and for this specific class here in Virginia. And we are very grateful for to be able to celebrate this day with you. And we look forward to many more celebrations together as a community, as a congregation. And I want to let everybody know that there is a book on the weekly Torah portion that I put in the chat that Rabbi Leff has authored, that in the Asher residence we look at as one of the great books on the Parsha. And so I want to recommend that. And of course, there are many other books that Rabbi Leff authored as well. And I want to thank everybody for coming. And thank you to the office staff for helping with the logistics here. Thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your day to celebrate this important day on the Jewish calendar, and the important day for the entire Jewish people to celebrate the fact that we have a homeland and that we're able to live in it under our own defense and on our own terms. It's a great miracle. And look forward to getting together for many more occasions to study together, to celebrate together. And once again, thank you to Rabbi Leff for visiting us virtually here in Virginia.
I just want to offer an invitation that if you come to visit Eretz Yisrael, come to visit us in Moshav Matatyahu.
Thank you. Oh, I heard great things about the Moshav. Thank you very much. And I know that hospitality is exceptional. Thank you, Rabbi Leff. Thank you all.
Thank you, son.